Let me ask you, Elijah. One thing that I do encounter, and then I'd like to get your thoughts on it, Subdeacon. People tend to get really confounded when they hear Syriac fathers. Oh, well, you know what? We know about Augustine. We know about St. John Chrysostomos. We've heard of all these figures, but then they hear an Ephraim, then they hear a Jacob, and they're like, well, who are they? They get a little bit confused about them. Is that something that you encounter a bit often, Elijah?
Absolutely. Even honestly, among Catholics as well. Yep. They don't know who the Syriac fathers. They've heard of Ephraim. That's, the famous one. He's a doctor of the church. But they haven't heard of the other ones which follow him or even precede him. And especially, like you said, Protestants. They've heard of Augustine. They've heard of all the, famous church fathers. But then you go into Jacob. Like they probably can't even tell you who it is. They can't tell you what century he came from, or it's just kind of unfortunate because all the accusations that they make about Catholics and Orthodox, they go out the window once you look at the Syriac fathers, because they're kind of like the bridge between, the Greeks and the Latins, right? Because you have the Greeks saying one thing and the Latins saying one thing sometimes, and then you have the Syriacs who kind of like a bridge between the two. And if the Protestants were to read the Syriac fathers, I think a lot of their misconceptions would be answered.
Yeah, agree. Thoughts on that, Subdeacon Daniel?
Yeah, so I agree with what Elijah said about it. It really throws all their presuppositions out the window, because what Protestants are accustomed to dealing with is what I call imperial Christianity. They think they're familiar with it, but they're really not. And it's Latin, Greek, mainly probably Greek fathers, some Latin fathers. But no one considers extra imperial Christianity. It's easy to make the false accusation of, well, imperial Christianity corrupted at a certain time, whatever it is that their accusation is. Okay, so what do you do when you're talking about Christians that are not within the borders of the empire, that have nothing to do with Hellenic Latin issues, or there's no like Facebook, there's no email, there's no like I'll call you and tell you what's going on. They have their own world, their own issues, and their own part of the world. Like as they said about Judea was in a remote corner of the empire. So the Syriacs are even more remote than that. And I really don't think that they have ever thought about it to consider the question of Syriac Christianity.
Yeah. You bring up a number of really, really good points there, Subdeacon Daniel, and I think that when we begin to really analyze them, really good point. I'd like to point out to the audience, when we think of incredible scholars in the Syriac world right now, the great Dr. Brock, who we've had the great pleasure of doing multiple shows. I think the good Lord willing, many more in the future. God grant him health and many, many more years, because it's truly a blessing. Stop and think, and you look at their scholarly works, and none of them are going to ever claim, well, look, you've got an Ephraim, you've got a Jacob, or any of these that are, they're looking at the rise of monasticism, and they're ripping this off and they're copying it, and they're then in turn, for them, it's convenient to believe Saint Mary is perpetual virgin. To me, that not only is that ludicrous, there's no evidence of that. The great scholars would not ever even claim that. And then you have this belief widespread. And to me, when we look at the Syriac fathers, this to me is an incredible mark of Catholicity. You've got it all over the world, everywhere you look. In fact, as I was talking to you, maybe about a week or 2 weeks ago, by the way, for people that may wonder, Subdeacon Daniel's an incredible help for me. I bounce thoughts off of him before debates. We talk about things. In fact, Elijah is an incredible help as well. And one thing that we realize is, look, a mark of orthodoxy in the early church was believing Holy Mary to be perpetual virgin. You're not going to encounter an early church father that will deny Holy Mary remain perpetual virgin. You just don't find it. Maybe you'll find a heretic here and there who had very poor Christology, but you don't find an early church father denying it. And when you look east, west, you look everywhere, and you look at the incredible Syriac fathers, this to me lends the fact that this is Catholic, this is universal. The Syriac fathers put that further stamp right there.